Seminole Sidelines, happy Wednesday. Thanks for watching us on Osceola YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all various social media channels. Very happy welcome to Eric Luallen, the voice of the Florida State baseball team up in Durham and ready for the ACC baseball tournament. Curt Weiler, the Osceola senior writer, Bob Ferrante, the Osceola editor. We're back in Tallahassee providing coverage and enjoying the start of this ACC baseball tournament, as well as a fun start to postseason for a lot of different sports from Florida State softball. Obviously, the women's golf team had a nice run out there in California, and the men's golf team will be, I think, en route out there for the first round. They play on Friday. We're just a little bit of a note. We're going to pre-record today's show, just what it worked out for everybody's schedules. But we're going to, so no questions, that kind of thing. But we're going to hit on some key topics with Lulu and Curt. I think to start, I kind of like this ACC baseball tournament format, guys. I wasn't a huge pool play fan, and it's tough with this league expanding just to figure out what works well for so many programs now, especially coming in from Cal and Stanford. Lulu, your first impressions, do you like this format? What are your thoughts so far?
I like it. I don't have an issue with it at all. If you're going to go to a format and you're going to bring basically every team in, I don't like double elimination formats and something like this. I hate the idea of just completely potentially killing your pitching staff over the course of a week before postseason starts. So I really dislike double elimination for a tournament like this. But yeah, the pool play was always weird. The positive on pool play, when we did it with 8 teams, you were guaranteed 3 games. When we did it with, and you just had 2 8-team or 2 14 groups, you played the other 3 teams in your group. You were going to play 3 games guaranteed. If you made it to the championship game, you played a 4th game. That set everybody up great for postseason. So all those teams that were getting to the postseason, they got their 3 weekend starters in. Now, you had to try to figure something out. In a lot of cases, guys didn't necessarily have 4 starters for a final, or the way that format worked where you would have a game where you knew that you didn't have to win to get to the final. We had that happen against Virginia one year where they were able to throw Holtzen, who was a first-round draft pick. They were able to hold him back for the championship game and gave them a great advantage. But from that standpoint, I liked that you knew how many games you were going to go play. In the revised version of that, when you had 12 teams, you were playing at least 2 games. If you made it to the semifinals, you got a 3rd game. If you made it to the final, you got a 4th game. I thought that was good for the teams from a standpoint of getting ready for postseason, positioning yourself for postseason. I thought it was good for the fans because they could spend money knowing that, hey, if I want to go ahead and go, I know I can get to see my team play at least 2 games, or I know I can get to see my team play at least 3 games. Now you don't have that. But I think from a standpoint of trying to figure out the ultimate goal of crowning a tournament champion, I like this format better than the pool play.
Yeah. Curt, same question to you. Do you like it so far? And maybe also, like Lulu talked about, some of those advantages that could be there for a Florida State or some of those top seeds. What do you think about potential advantages that could be there for the Seminoles?
Well, it's been chaotic so far. I mean, 3 of the 4 like lower seeds, the 15 and 16 seed both won their games yesterday and are playing today. And there's been some upsets that it's been good television for sure. I mean, baseball is not a one-off sport, if you will. I mean, you're going to have more variance in a sport based around is when you're playing one-off games. So you wonder if it's kind of like how often like the best team will win. But I think like rest-wise, for sure, I think it will help Florida State that whether they play Duke or Pitt upset Louisville last night, actually. Whether you play Duke or Pitt Friday afternoon, they'll have played 2 games already in the week and I think burned through, or I guess 2 or 1. I guess Duke's only played 1, but I think you've earned the right to be rested. I mean, it was a big deal. They won that Saturday game. Winning that was a big deal for them because they would have been playing today. They would have been playing late tonight. I think actually if they'd lost, they would have been the 6th seed if they'd been swept by North Carolina. So salvaging 1 was a big deal for setting themselves up well for, for a regional as much as anything, of just like you're playing as many as 3 or as few as 1 games this weekend. And obviously 1 is weird where 2 of your starters aren't going to play before a regional next weekend. They're not going to pitch, but it's better than having to play that Wednesday game that could really mess things up in theory.
Well, and I think if you see, the 1 to 4 seeds, if you see any of those teams get behind in a game and have to make a pitching change, if they're down 2, 3, 4 runs, I think you'll see them, or more. I think you'll see them go to their other starters in a relief situation just to get them in there. And then, hey, if we come back, we'll deal with the next game next time. But they still want to get those guys in there and get them some time in a game. They just don't want them to go a full week without pitching in a game situation. So I think you'll see that out of the top 4 seeds. But that's one of the things. I think it's huge in this format. It was big in the last format to be one of the top 4 seeds, because if you ended up with 3 teams in your pod that were 1-1, the highest seed was moving on. Now it's big because you get that double bye, but it's also big for your preparation for postseason, because you are only playing 3 games max. And if you play those 3 games, it's essentially just a weekend series for you right before you get into postseason. And I think that's a great advantage for one of those teams. And it certainly is something else to have you shoot for one of those top 4 spots.
It feels a very pitching coach friendly type of format as far as just mapping.
Well, unless you're 9 to 16, then it's not. Well, and you also have to look at it this way. You've got to figure that, okay, there's talk that maybe the ACC could get 9 or 10 teams in there. I don't know if 10's realistic. 9, maybe. But so you have to figure that most, if not all, of those teams that are in that 9 to 16 category going into the tournament, they've got to know that their only opportunity to get in the postseason is to win this whole thing. And there's a part of me that I don't necessarily like the automatic bids, but there's also a part of me that says, look, if Cal comes in here and wins 5 straight games, send them to the postseason. Like, they've done something to earn that. And I'm okay with that. I might be more okay with that now than I would have been in the other formats, because I really do think that this is so much tougher as a 9 to 16 to get all the way to the final and win it.
Tell you what, guys, Cal is going to have to schedule some 9 a.m. Pacific time ball games out there for the home games. This is their prime time. This is when Cal comes to shine.
We're doing it again right now as we record this.
Well, and I don't know whether they came out Sunday or Monday, but they obviously could not have had much time to adjust to the time change. Nope. So they're playing it yesterday and today. They're playing at 6 a.m. Their bodies think it's 6 a.m. They can't possibly have adjusted to it just yet. So that is like, I can't even imagine. I remember playing football in college, and I think it was the 1990 Fiesta Bowl. I want to say was like an 11 o'clock Eastern time start. So for us, playing at 9 a.m. local time in Arizona was just, it was crazy, because we never played games. We never played games before noon, and we didn't really play many noon games in that time because we had so many night games at Doak back in those days. So it really is so much different to get your body adjusted to that and to play an early game like that. And then you throw on top of it the 3-hour difference between Pacific time and Eastern time. And that's huge. I'm still surprised that they went out and played the way they did yesterday, and that they're doing it again today.
Because
I also have to point out that the guys who pitched for Cal yesterday were the guys who shut us out on the Saturday game in Berkeley. And those guys can pitch a little bit. And I don't think people really understood exactly how good those 2 guys were.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be an interesting storyline. It's going to be fun to watch this tournament, see how it all unfolds. Again, congrats to Mike Bell, Pitt, picking up that win Tuesday night. Let's shift into Alex Lodise, because I think we've had some good discussions as a staff about him, and I know you, Lulu, you've been on the show a lot these last few weeks and talked about him here and there. But these numbers over time have accumulated into one of the best seasons in Florida State history. It's an ACC Player of the Year season. It's a Defensive Player of the Year season. 5 errors at shortstop is pretty darn impressive. .483 on base percentage. You'd be hard pressed to find a day when he was not on base. Curt, we got a chance to listen in to Alex today on Zoom. This was his first time talking to us about, in part his journey from North Florida, why he's at Florida State, what Link has meant to him. And I wonder if you can kind of unpack some of those thoughts of what Alex said to us on that Zoom this morning.
Yeah, I think, I talked to Alex, actually, funny, for a feature that I wrote right after he was named the National Midseason Player of the Year. And I think he talked today. He talked about, his goals coming into the year were he wanted to be, he was kind of manifesting being the first team All-ACC shortstop and being the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. He said kind of that award's finally up for grabs. He said because Vance Honeycutt's finally playing pro ball instead of man in center field for UNC. So it was open. A Florida State player had never won that. And obviously he accomplished both of those. But on top of that, he was ACC Player of the Year. I mean, he's the first 400 batting average for a Florida State player this far into the season in a while. I mean, it might be Buster Posey. That was like the last who's hitting 400 this far into a season. It seems like that could be the case. And on top of that, I mean, the shortstop he plays, but he definitely was gratitude, appreciation for Link. He gives a lot of the credit for his defensive growth to Link. I think Link kind of pushed some of that back on him and talked about the things that he does well. But I think, it's definitely, gratitude for the player that Link has helped him become and the coaching staff has helped him become. And I think he spoke about, his confidence coming into the season. He said he was hitting the ball better in preseason than he has been this season, but it speaks to just the level he's been playing at since January.
Well, and I think too with Lodise, the part about Link saying that with Lodise and his part in it all, obviously you can have all the talent in the world, you can have the best coaching in the world. If you don't put in that effort, if you don't do the things that you need to do, you're not going to get there. And so I think it's great that Link pointed that out, that Alex is a part of this as well. And I asked Link, it was probably a month ago in one of our pregame talks, I said, could you have foreseen this kind of jump? This is a jump kind of like we saw with Tony Thomas from his sophomore to junior year, the way he went from what he was as a freshman and sophomore to what he then became. Alex has always kind of had the power numbers. Tony maybe necessarily didn't, but that's the kind of jump he's made. And Link said, for us, for the guys that are out here every day that see how he goes about his business, to see how he goes about putting in the work, his preparation, all of those things, none of us are surprised by what he's been able to do. And I think, he's been great for this team. I think the guys, when guys talk about looking up to other players or following leaders or doing all those things, I think this is really genuine. This is not just window dressing that you might heap praise on a guy that's having a good season. I think all of this stuff is really legit. It's really genuine when they talk about Lodise the way they do.
Lulu, you've been calling these games for a long time. I've been watching Florida State baseball. How
19th
many?
Season. 19.
I've been watching Florida State baseball a long time. Obviously going back to the Sunshine Network days with with guys like Tom Block and Gene, and even Link Jarrett brought that up on the Zoom today. That Link was a part of that, calling a couple of games. And it's hard because there are different eras of college baseball. There's better pitching nowadays. There's different bats from back then. But I'm fascinated with the discussion of where Alex stacks up among some great Florida State shortstops, or just great shortstop seasons if we're trying to break them down to some extent. Taylor Walls was remarkable. Stephen Drew's power numbers as a shortstop across 3 years. I've said it a couple of times, go to Noel fan if you've forgotten how good some of those power numbers were for Stephen Drew. But Lulu, can you kind of put in perspective just how good of a shortstop season this is as far as defense, but also at the plate that we've seen from Alex?
Well, defensively, I'll go back to when I started doing the games on the radio. That was 2007 season. Mark Hallberg transferred in for his junior year that year. And defensively, I think that those two are comparable, Lodise and Hallberg. And I think that their seasons, Lodise this year, Hallberg 2007, are the best that I've seen out of a shortstop defensively. Anybody in between. And then obviously I saw Stephen Drew play a lot. He was back in the time when I was doing talk shows in the afternoon and covered it very closely. Drew had great power numbers, and he hit for average, and he did all those things. The defensive numbers were not what Hallberg or Lodise have done. That's not to say Stephen Drew was bad defensively. It's just to say it wasn't in the same atmosphere as what Lodise has done this year and Hallberg back then. And we kind of forget about Hallberg, and I think maybe it's because of Buster Posey, and that was his sophomore year, and he had just made the move to catcher, and we focused so much on him. And we had Tony Thomas that season, who hit .430 with 11 home runs, and we had, all the way up and down that lineup, a team that really surprised me that we didn't get out of the regional, super regional format and get to Omaha. But Hallberg hit .360 that year. He didn't have the power numbers. He had 3 home runs that season, but he was a .360 hitter, and I think he fielded like 975 or somewhere right around there, really similar to what Lodise is doing right now. I'm looking at it. He was 975. He made 7 errors, and Lodise this year is sitting at 5 errors and 973. And those are, like, you can go back, and if you just look at those numbers, you're not going to find any other shortstop in between there who put up those kind of defensive numbers. Now, I know fielding percentage doesn't capture it all, but Hallberg made plays all over the diamond, and Lodise, we've seen some of the range plays that he's made. There aren't a lot of times when you get a guy that's so good defensively and has so much range, their defensive numbers can sometimes take a hit because they make tough plays look so routine, and they might log some errors on plays that are really, really tough that other guys won't even get a glove on. But that really hasn't happened with Lodise. He makes those plays. He gets to those balls. We've seen 2 of those Jeter-esque leaping throws, ranging to his right, up in the air, body going away from first base where he's throwing guys out. And we've seen him a number of times get to balls behind the bag at second that other guys just don't get to. And so I think from a defensive standpoint, those 2 stand out to me over the last 19 seasons. Offensively, he's got the batting average and he's got the power numbers that Stephen Drew had. And when you look at Drew, his best season batting average wise was .402. His best season home run wise was 17. And his best season from an RBI standpoint was 59. And you look at Lodise right now, he stands at 63 RBIs, 17 home runs, .422 batting average. So offensively, I think he's head and shoulders above other guys. And that's other guys that were using different bats. The bats changed after the 2010 season, I believe it was. That's when they went to the BB Core bats. So there's a big difference in what the guys pre-2010 were swinging compared to what they're swinging now. And again, you brought up pitching, and Link has talked about it before. With the draft going down to 20 rounds since COVID, instead of 40 rounds or 50 rounds, there are a lot more arms in here. Everybody's got guys that throw 95. I can remember 10 years ago, Florida State didn't have a guy that threw 95. And now everybody's got multiple guys that do that. So I think these guys are facing, I don't know that I want to say they're facing better pitchers, but they're facing better stuff. And maybe it's not quite harnessed the way it might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago, but there are so many more guys out there that can really fling it. So I think that says a lot about what Alex Lodise has been able to do.
Yeah, I think it's been a season that's for the Florida State record books. Potentially, we're looking at a National Player of the Year type of season too, when those awards kind of come into play. Golden Spikes, Dick Hauser, et cetera. Moving on there. Guys, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, let's talk about big picture of Florida State in the ACC tournament, what a successful weekend looks like, what the committee might be looking at, some of those kind of big picture topics. We'll be back in just about a minute here.
Hey Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
Back on Seminole Sidelines. Hope you're having a great day on Wednesday. Again, we've been talking Florida State baseball. The voice of the Seminoles, Eric Luallen, joins us. Curt Weiler, senior writer with the Osceola. I'm Bob Ferrante. Okay, we've talked a little bit about Alex Lodise, the ACC Tournament. We're looking forward to, obviously, some games later Wednesday, Thursday, before the Seminoles play Friday, 3 p.m. I think when Link talked this morning, Curt, on the Zoom, talked a little bit about, I was a little bit surprised. I thought he would say specifically who the starter might be on Friday, but I think some of the conversations he said that he's talked with Mike Capozzi, the pitching coach, about, hey, we want to see what the matchup is going to be before we determine who that Friday arm is going to be. I was slightly surprised by that. Were you, and what do you think might end up happening as you look at, hey, we don't know what the matchup is yet, but what the Seminoles could do as far as on the mound?
I mean, I will say, I wonder, I always wonder when things like that are said, if that's more just a bit of gamesmanship and they have an idea and are just like, they why would they say it? Why would they give whoever more advanced notice to know who that might be when, I mean, they have an off day tomorrow. So I wonder somewhat if that's the case, but I mean, it does speak to, I think, what Lulu said. You're right, Lulu, of if you're quickly finding out you might only have one game, that definitely changes the math over how you're using guys. You might throw two starters in that game. But I think it also speaks to, I mean, the fact is, and we can get into this, if it were to be Pitt, and like I had questions about that because Pitt used they rode their two best pitchers pretty heavily last night to beat Louisville, so it will be a tougher path for them today against Duke, but it's possible. You can't rule it out. I think the fact is, if it's Pitt instead of Duke, if Pitt were to pull off another upset tonight, that's not the resume boosting win. It kind of changes. You might need to, at that point, it's possible you need to win the ACC tournament to probably play your way into being a top 8, because Pitt would be a quad 2, wouldn't be especially resume boosting. So if that's the case, does it change the math over? I mean, my thought coming into the week was, if you're only guaranteed one game, you're probably starting Jamie Arnold. That's you want to go down with kind of your best bullet, if you will, and that is Jamie. But if it were Pitt, do you maybe consider pushing Jamie back? I mean, the other fact of it is, how are you thinking of aligning your regional rotation? You got to think about that being a week out. Are you throwing last year it was Carson Dorsey game 1, Jamie game 2? Are you thinking Bellini game 1 and Jamie game 2? If so, then maybe you think about making that switch this week. I mean, there are a lot of factors at play.
Yeah, I think you're headed down the right road there, Curt. There's a lot to think about with that. It's who's the team you're playing? What's the matchup? Look, we've got 3 left-handed starters. You've got Arnold, Bellini, and Mendez. They're all 3 lefties. They're all vastly different pitchers, though. Every one of those guys has pitches that profile completely different from one another. And Link and I we talked about that last week before the Saturday start that Wes Mendez had, about how he and Bellini both are fastball, curveball, slider, changeup guys, but they're completely different. There's nothing about any one of their 4 pitches that is the same as the other one. So you might have a team that you feel like maybe it's a left-handed heavy lineup, but I like this matchup with this left-hander against that team than this left-hander against that team. So that's part of what you've got to look at. If you're playing Pitt and not Duke, that factors into it. If North Carolina loses on Friday, and you've got now a different opponent for Saturday than North Carolina, if you win on Friday, then that may change what you want to do. Regional and how you want to pitch regional. Do you want to go with your number 1 guy in the first game, an opener against a 4 seed, or do you want to go with your 2 guy and bring your number one in a second game. All of those things factor into it. And I think it's really, I understand what you're saying about gamesmanship, but I think it really is more along the lines of just really wanting to see what the matchup is and then trying to best situate yourself for next week. That's not to say this is unimportant, but obviously next week is very important. And you can't talk about that with the players. You don't want them to be under the impression that you're putting more emphasis on one than the other, but you still have to kind of look forward to that. So I think all of that factors into it.
You know, this is kind of Captain Obvious here. You'd like to have 3 good quality starts, regardless of how you arrange the rotation. If you're going to go that deep into a tournament, what does a sustainable run look like for Florida State, maybe beside how you arrange the rotation? How do you maximize what you get?
I mean, I'll say, to me, this is, Link hasn't really shied away all year from saying this team is going to be built on run prevention. It feels like you need deep starts. Is like you talked about, that's where it starts. I mean, it was 8.2 combined between Arnold and Vellini last week. Oh, that's just with the volatility of every college bullpen. I mean, people talk about Florida State's bullpen. It's every college bullpen to a degree.
Yeah.
Like
Louisville lost just 13 last night.
Yep. It is. Everyone has those days. There are some that are better than others more consistently, but there is no great college bullpen. It's a fallacy. So I think it's the longevity. I think whoever throws game one, and I mean, he said that Wes Mendez is available too, it sounds like, but I wouldn't expect it to be Wes. But I mean, credit to Wes. He's come into his own the last couple of weeks and seems to be rounding into form in the right way. But the fact is, you don't know how to put that much into this week, because if you look back to last year, I mean, remember Carson Dorsey in the ACC title game against Duke, and then remember Carson Dorsey, who he became in the NCAA tournament, and how dominant he was in the regional and then the super and then in Omaha. I mean, you don't want to, I mean, things can change in a hurry, and it's so much about, the form guys can find, but this week, I feel like it's really just about, I mean, winning is important because it feels like you're on the top 8 bubble, but it's about setting up for next week is the most important priority.
Well, and I think, too, as far as...
Imagine having Carson Dorsey on this team, too. Not knocking Mendes or Vellini in the least, but add in Dorsey this year.
You think about only the good with him, and he was great how he ended it, but like he was in the regular season a kind of you never knew what you were going to get type of guy. So like I think people have short-term memory loss with comparing this year's team to last year's team and stuff like that. But Lulu, what were you going to say?
Well, I don't think it's a big stretch to think that Mendez could go to tomorrow, Friday. See, I'm already trying to speed the week up. I don't think it's odd to think that Mendez could go. It would be 1 day short rest after a week where you want 1 day short rest. So it's not really that, I think, that much of a stretch to see that happen if they decide to go that route. And I don't know. I have no idea what he may be thinking and what matchups he might be looking at and who he might be thinking against whom. So, we'll all just have to wait and see what they decide to do there. But I wouldn't be surprised of any of the 3 guys getting the call for the Friday game.
The question then, I guess, becomes if you were to, do you keep Mendez on Friday for a regional? Because otherwise, I guess everyone would be on a day short rest, or you'd have to do some other shuffling, I mean, it would be an interesting situation of you're moving someone else up on short rest a day to Friday next week.
All right, let's wrap it up with this one, because it's kind of the big picture question this time of year, right? As the NCAA selection committee has taken into account all the games that they've watched. At some point, they're going to be traveling to Indianapolis. Florida State Athletic Director Michael Alford among them. He's been in on a lot of these phone calls and Zoom meetings. He will be in Indianapolis as part of that selection committee. Right now, Florida State, the key number is the RPI. It's 14. It's also who you've beaten in a series. It's not just necessarily your RPI, so I shouldn't say it's just one singular number. But Lulu, I guess a 2-part question. What's the resume currently? And then what can Florida State do in Durham to strengthen that resume to say, we're not just a regional host, we're potentially in that conversation as a top 8 national seed.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think hosting is, to me, they've nailed that down. I don't really think, even if you lose on Friday, I don't think that changes that. Top 8, I think if you talk to this coaching staff, they tell you that they think they should be a top 8 seed. Whether the committee will or not, it does depend on how much reliance they put on the RPI. And on any given year, they can either really follow it closely or they can jump around quite a bit. So there's no telling how much they're going to follow that. If you come in here and win the tournament, I think there's no doubt that you're one of the top 8 seeds. Are you a top 8 seed if you lose the first game? Again, you might feel like you are. That doesn't mean that the selection committee is going to feel that way, and that may put them on the outside looking in as far as top 8 seeds go. Do you win one game and make it to the semifinal and lose in top 8? Again, I think that is going to be – I think you're leaving a lot in the hands of the selection committee as opposed to taking it into your own hands. So I think right now they're kind of on that – they're kind of on that cusp of, are they 7, 8, are they 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there. And the better you do here, the more you move, the more you sit on that teeter-totter and kind of, take it back this way. So, I think you go out there and you worry about the game Friday and try to win that game. And then you worry about the game Saturday and try to win that game. And then you worry about the game Sunday and try to win that one. And then you just take your chances with what comes of that. The fact of the matter is that the coaching staff they're not doing all that math. The players aren't doing all that math. They're trying to go out there and win a game on Friday, and then they'll deal with Saturday when Saturday comes.
And we don't know. I mean, we know coming into the week, Florida State's right there in the mix for probably the 7 or 8, is where they're they had a chance to push for a top 4 if they'd won that North Carolina series. They didn't. Now North Carolina's the team probably more in that conversation. But the fact we don't know for sure, but last year's team probably won a top 8 because they were the 8th seed with that run to the title game. I think if they hadn't beaten Virginia to win that pool, if they hadn't beaten Wake in the semis to go to the championship game, it's entirely possible they would have been the 9 behind Oklahoma. I think so. You look at, I think it's you don't know for sure. Personally, I've seen them projected as the 10 or 11 seed coming into the week. There's some teams' metrics above that, you can poke holes in Oregon's resume. They've played a lot of Q3 and Q4 games, and they've lost 12 Q3, Q4 games. Well, Florida State's lost 1. You can poke holes in Coastal's resume, where I think they're 4-5 against Q1, where Florida State's 12-9. I think there are reasons where you could see, especially with a win or 2 this week, Florida State having a strong case to be above them and to maybe be in that 8 spot. Oregon State's the wild card because they're the independent. They've played a really weird schedule. I think only 19 home games, but the fact of the matter is the only thing Florida State can't control, like Lulu said, is themselves and winning. If you make the run, you really can boost your resume this week, especially if it's Duke tomorrow, top 30. If it's North Carolina on Saturday, that's a top 10. It's a top 10, top 5 RPI game. That can really help you.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. The committee looks at RPI. They use it as a metric. But they look deeper than just the RPI into those things that you mentioned, Curt. They look at those Q1 wins and they look at, Q2 and Q3 and Q4, and they dig deeply into all of that. They look at your conference record. So, if you're, and I know they were talking about it, Mike Farron and Gabby Sanchez were talking about it last night during the late game, the Notre Dame BC game, talking about a team like Kentucky and their RPI with a 13-17 conference record, as opposed to another similar RPI team that has a better conference record. Those are all things that they're going to look at and evaluate and use. So I always say the polls don't matter. And when I say the polls, I'm talking about, and this is not to knock any organization, but the D1 baseball and Baseball America and all of those don't matter. The RPI is the one that they really kind of focus on, but that doesn't mean that they're following it to a T. That just means that's a tool they're using when they get into their discussions.
Yep.
All right. So that's a good baseball discussion for us on a Wednesday afternoon on Seminole Sidelines. Obviously, the super regional for the softball team will be starting on Thursday. We'll have full coverage on FloridaStateRivals.com. There will be a press conference 6:30 Wednesday. I'll be there, so we'll have some more softball for you then. Looking forward to Super Regional, obviously. Lulu will be a busy man Friday. Of course, we'll be two screening it. If you'll be watching baseball and softball at the same time on Friday, what time is your on deck show on Friday afternoon with that 3 p.m.?
2:45.
So 2:45
with the 3 o'clock first pitch, and it's the first game, so we won't have the potential of getting delayed due to games backing up. Of course, weather could always factor into that. Right now, the weather looks beautiful up here right now. We're going to be looking at, I think, high around 80 today and around the same tomorrow, and then 73-ish, I think, on Friday. And we had rain this morning, but I think that was a front coming through. And right now, there isn't any in the forecast the rest of the week. So
I'm knocking on wood for you right now.
Huh?
I'm knocking on wood for you right now. I'm knocking on wood.
There you go.
Enjoy the ball games, Lulu. It should be a good week there at the Durham Bulls Athletic Park. It's a really pretty stadium on TV. I'm sure it's absolutely exceptional.
And tune in. I've got so many just ridiculous facts about games in Durham because I've had to call so many games up here in the past. So there's some good baseball history here. There's some good history behind that stadium and the old ballpark, and it's always fun for me to call a game because Bull Durham's one of my favorite. It's my favorite baseball movie. It's one of my favorite movies. So it's always fun for me to come to Durham and get to call a game here and bring up some of those things when there's time to talk about those things during the course of a game, and there always is.
Yes. All right, guys. Well, the dogs are barking right on cue. We're going to wrap up Seminole Sidelines on a Wednesday. We'll map out a Friday show with a 3 p.m. start time. That's probably not the best scenario for us to go live.
No,
but
I won't be able to join you.
Thanks.
We'll just simulcast your call. We'll get a video of you up in the booth.
Well, we'll see if we can make that happen.
All right. Appreciate Lulu joining us. Appreciate my dogs joining us. Thanks to Curt Weiler for joining us. And we will talk to y'all next time. Like, subscribe, enjoy these Osceola videos. Take care. We'll see you soon.